Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, host also of RT's talk show, Crosstalk. Well, the intelligence community, as it's known, has just published its unclassified version of its report on election interference in 2020. Our audience will remember the report it published in early January 2017 about the 2016 election, a report that had most disastrous consequences for the next 4 years because it asserted, without providing much in the way of evidence, that Russia interfered in the 2016 election to secure the election of Donald Trump and to ensure the crushing of Hillary Clinton. So
we were told that Vladimir Putin personally,
yes,
personally was involved.
Exactly. So now we have the one on the 2020 election, and surprisingly, it's very much like the 2016 election report. Most of it is devoted to Russia and what it calls its influence operations. And it talks about how it uses these various cutouts and people who relay the Kremlin's message, and stuff that people who regularly read the New York Times and the Washington Post are very, very familiar with, because of course it's the same people who write these reports who brief the reporters at the New York Times and the Washington Post. So the usual cast of characters appears. Konstantin Kilimnik, who, as we know, used to work at the International Republican Institute of John McCain before he became kind of an interpreter and assistant to Paul Manafort in Ukraine, and Manafort, as we all know, actually was urging the Yanukovych government to orient itself towards the European Union and against Russia. So it was that operation that Kilimnik was engaged in. And we also know that Kilimnik was well looked upon by the State Department and so on. Nonetheless, Kilimnik is part of the Russiagate narrative. We constantly have this sinister sounding name that he has links with Russian intelligence. Anyway, so Kilimnik is there, then Derkach is there, and they're all doing terrible things. They were trying to undermine the candidacy of Biden and enhance the candidacy of Trump. Now, there's a problem here, obviously, which is that Trump didn't win. And so if the Russians were going to all this trouble to secure Trump's victory and ensure the defeat of Biden, and we're funneling all this damaging information about Biden into the American body politic, well, they didn't do a very good job because their man lost. So why exactly are we so agitated about this? China makes only a very brief appearance, which was kind of surprising because the previous head of the DNI, Michael Ratcliffe, or John Ratcliffe, I'm not sure if it was John Ratcliffe, had said that China was the main actor interfering in the 2020 election, and he had said this last year. So it was surprising that suddenly they come to the opposite conclusion, that China was really just sat on its hands, was an observer, didn't want to get involved. And Iran makes an appearance here. Again, kind of surprising because if there's one thing Iran wanted to do is just to ensure that Trump lost. I mean, there's no love lost between Iran and Trump. So the report acknowledges this. Yes, they didn't like Trump, but they didn't interfere to damage Biden. So that was okay. So therefore, they that's right. So that was, and then Hezbollah, surprisingly, this Lebanese organization.
Can't forget about Hezbollah.
Yeah, exactly, they interfered as well. As did Maduro in Venezuela. Again, you'd have thought he has enough problems on his plate.
What dictators do.
Exactly. But the most sinister aspect of all of this is that we have now accepted as a given that intelligence services can interfere in domestic politics. Because what this is really all about is an attempt to smear anyone who criticizes Biden and the Biden administration as essentially agents of Russia. So they don't actually say directly, hey, they're on the Kremlin payroll, because of course they would be in trouble if they said that. So they become influence actors. You know, they're sort of maybe unwitting transmitters of Kremlin disinformation. But what this is doing is essentially that they're inserting themselves into domestic debates in order to favor one side and to smear and denigrate the other side. And this is a very, very troubling development. Peter, what's your take?
Well, intelligence community, well, that's turned out to be an oxymoron. I have to, you know, it's no coincidence that they pick on the countries that the official Washington hates. Russia, Iran, Venezuela, Hezbollah, and then China gets a free pass, even though in last summer, you know, we had people in the Trump administration saying that, you know, China is the biggest threat to American democracy. The biggest threat to American democracy is neoliberalism and the people that profit from it. But we'll keep that as a sidebar, okay? I mean, this report is a joke, okay? There is no evidence presented whatsoever. It's high probability nonsense all over again. And in juxtaposition, I mean, this is an insult to intelligence. I mean, considering how many states brought suits against, tried to get a hearing in state courts and the Supreme Court. I mean, how many thousands of people signed affidavits? I mean, this is just a sick joke. This is ridiculous, okay? Right. I mean, America is so vulnerable when at the same time, and we could just go back to 1945. We can go much further back if you want, but let's just draw the line at 1945. How many elections has the United States interfered in around the world? George, we could talk here, and we could talk here so long that I would have a beard like yours, okay? I mean, we don't even have to go there. It's just absolutely stupid on its face. I mean, the United States is criticizing election interference when it's its calling card around the world, okay? When they interfere in everyone's elections, okay? And what about, you know, the countries like the UK, because Christopher Steele, can you spell that? How much was the UK involved in the 2016 election?
Well, exactly.
How much they were in 2020? What about Israel? Israel spies on the United States 24/7, okay? You know, the Turks do it, everybody does it, okay? And so they have this myopic thing that, you know, first of all, they're gonna go after the traditional enemies, which the United States has made them enemies. It's not the other way around, all right? And then your point, perfectly to the point, is that, you know, this is just a smear campaign. It's a smear. George, I bet you anything. I'm gonna go out here in left field. I'm gonna assume that you believe that 2 + 2 is 4. Yes?
Yeah, I think so.
I bet you if we ask Vladimir Putin, do you think 2 + 2 equals 4? Okay, George, if he says it's 4, then you're trafficking for Vladimir Putin, okay? I mean, this report, again, is an insult to intelligence. People can't have their own independent thoughts.
That's right. That's
okay?
Exactly.
You essentially, and if you're interested in foreign policy as an area of study, there's some really good people that do it. Most do it very badly. It's called realism. Realism. Okay. Realism is like this. Well, you know, the United States has its position, but let's take a step back and say, well, how do you think the Russians look at this? Maybe they got a point. Okay. I mean, the United States, you know, the United States with its proxies in NATO has surrounded Russia with military bases. Okay. And they're moving right all the way up to Russia's border. George, I'm going to shock you here. Russia does not have bases in Canada and Mexico. Okay,
right. Yeah, no, that's right, and you know, therefore they can argue that, well, anyone who expresses criticism and skepticism about NATO's strategy is therefore mouthing Kremlin's talking points. Well, no, I mean, there's very good arguments to be made that NATO has pursued a reckless, dangerous policy. And the Kremlin is absolutely right in pointing this out. People look. This is a free country. It's supposed to be a free country. We're supposed to. That's what the internet is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about free debate. Russians can take part in a free debate. They're entitled. Russians are allowed to express their views. And here we have this intelligence community that is delegitimizing any point of view that the West of the U.S. political establishment deems unacceptable.
I think it was Twitter. It was a week ago, 10 days ago, where you can't question your faith, our faith in NATO. Now, it stuck in my mind. Why would you use the word faith? Is it a dogma? Is it a religion?
Right.
Like undermine the purpose of NATO. Okay, well, that's an interesting. Undermine the faith in NATO. That is such a bizarre description. Okay, why should I have faith in a military alliance?
That's right.
What? And going back and smearing people. One of the I think a lot of people would agree, the godfather of Soviet studies / Russian studies was George F. Kennan.
Yes.
And George F. Kennan lived very, very long. And even when the Cold War came to an end, the Warsaw Pact broke apart, disappeared itself. He said, NATO expansion would be a very big mistake.
Right.
Okay, here's the guy. He wrote the long telegram, one of the most interesting diplomatic cables, well, probably the most interesting cable ever written. And he had a keen understanding of the Soviet Union and of Russian history. And so if we use the standards now, he is a puppet of Putin. If he were still alive, he would be a puppet of Putin.
Right, no, that's exactly right. And we witnessed it in the case of our friend Stephen Cohen. And Stephen Cohen, a distinguished expert of Soviet studies.
He could speak Russian too. He could speak Russian too.
Yeah, speak Russian, and he was smeared. It becomes and it's amazing how it suddenly becomes acceptable to go around smearing people, damaging their reputations by suggesting that what they're saying is because they're on the Kremlin payroll, or they are unwitting tools of the Kremlin, or the useful idiots of Putin. It's an absolutely outrageous. And so this is what we're now coming to, because now the intelligence community goes to the social media, or the intelligence community and the politicians who are in bed with them. They go to the social media and say, hey, what have you done today to deplatform people? We've just been told all these terrible people are spreading Putin's propaganda. What have you done to deplatform them? So, then we get another round of purges. All sorts of people get kicked off on the pretext that they're somehow working for Putin. So that's another very sinister aspect of this whole, the intelligence community interference in domestic affairs.
See, this entire neoliberal mindset, what does it abhor the most? Debate. Okay, prove me wrong. Okay, I'll set my position out. Give me 20 minutes, and they'll give you 20 minutes. Let's talk about this thing. Okay. I mean, this means that there's no nuance, okay? This is an authoritarian mindset that you can't even talk about it. Okay, there are some people that angle themselves as being pro-Russia, but I understand it. No, it's just they're being anti-American. Okay, and I really get tired of that. Okay, because I appreciate people that understand Russian history, Russian culture, and how Russia views the world. Okay, not just being anti-American. And I find that not that I think we should bar them. No, but they don't make very good arguments. Okay, what I'm saying is that Stephen F. Cohen, one of the great brilliant people of our time. I had the privilege to meet him a number of times. Okay, he was actually quite critical of Russian domestic politics, yeah. and he thought, and he said repeatedly, is that the demonization of Russia on the international stage hinders what he believed, what he described as democratic forces, liberal forces in Russia. See, that's a deep thinker, a very deep thinker.
Yeah, and again, with him, it was a consistency. I mean, he was in the days of the Cold War, he was someone who was urging rapprochement and détente because he believed that was the best possible policy for the United States and for the world.
They never changed.
Security, stability, peace. And he retained all of that. Unlike others who kind of opportunistically battened onto détente, usually just to attack their opponents, like in that case Ronald Reagan. Oh yeah, we're against Reagan, but they never were sincere about it. It was just opportunism, and then they became born again anti-Russia hawks. So, but Cohen was always consistent. He's saying, look, it's in our interest to have good relations with the leading nuclear superpower in the world after the United States.
Well, and the interesting thing is that we have tomorrow and also on Friday, we have this the Chinese-American summit in Alaska. And Tony Blinken, if you're watching, I'm quite sure that will be said behind closed doors is that how problematic it is, the Russian-Chinese alliance, okay? It's not really an alliance yet. It could be, and I think maybe it should be. It's an entente right now. And how did he get there, Tony? How did he get that way, okay? How about you, Jake Sullivan? How did he get that way? It's because of jerks like you, okay? You can't think, you don't think three-dimensional, okay? You just think that, all America has to do is taunt and threaten, and it's going to get what it wants. No, those days are long, long gone, okay?
Because but there is a difference, though. I mean, there's no question the hostility that the Biden people have toward Russia is in no way comparable to their attitude towards China.
Well, I wonder why, George. I wonder why.
Exactly. Exactly. The Chinese, they have money and they have dedicated themselves to buying up America's elite, and that includes the Bidens and the
McConnells.
Exactly.
Let's keep it bipartisan here, George.
Bipartisan, absolutely right. Yes. This really is bipartisan. I mean, just about everybody in Congress is one way or another on the Chinese payroll. And I think that the hostility toward Russia is again, this is again very troubling. That they just spewing this stuff out. Russia's doing this and Russia is interfering here and interfering there, because it's generating this administration hostility toward Russia, which will guarantee it will end badly.
Yeah. I mean, we keep saying it. I mean, the Russiagate hoax, unfortunately, it was inevitable, would bleed into policy. And that's essentially what we have right now. See, they can't, it's like they're ratcheting up. You can't go back. You can only go to the next level, okay? Because they everything that they've said and they claim to believe in would collapse if they made a change of direction. So they're the ones that have, the die has been cast, okay? And it came from one side, okay? And then we had, over the last few weeks, the Russians saying, and we used it's a fanciful phrase, a strategic patience. Well, it really does apply in the Russian case. The Russians are saying, meh, okay, if you don't want to parlay, we're not going to, why should we engage in you? We don't need to be lectured by you at all. Right. So, why China is out there, I think it's very, very interesting. The thing with we have here, I keep talking about neoliberalism, but let's see how it's been applied. In the United States, it was the financialization of the economy. Okay, that means gutting the industrial base. Okay, and it's not Mexico and China and Vietnam and Indonesia stealing jobs. No, it's corporate America that is shutting down these jobs and starting outfits abroad. Okay, China didn't steal one job from the United States. Okay, I hate hearing that. It's a cliche and it's wrong. Okay, how did the Chinese apply neoliberalism? Well, they did. They took advantage of it to the hilt. Okay, they created an industrial base, and they were able. And very smartly, they turned into the factory of the world and created anything you could possibly want. Because in neoliberalism, the way it was practiced in the United States, all you can afford is cheap Chinese junk. Okay, and that's what they got. Okay, so the Chinese they didn't apply it the same way the West is, particularly the United States, because they became fabulously rich off of it. And the U.S. only elites did, not the country.
Right. No, that's right. And that's why you've got the intelligence, the security apparatus, America's political elite that is very heavily involved with China. And this has been going on for a long time. I mean, yeah, and people forget the 1990s and and the Clinton administration and all, and how they were already basically just selling the store to China. So this has been going on, and that's why when they publish these kind of intelligence community assessment, it's like there's no intelligence here. I mean, I don't know how many billions the United States spends on intelligence. It's a pretty penny. I don't know, maybe about 50 billion a year. What are they getting for this? I mean, it's the same rubbish that you would get, reading the New York Times. As I said, it's the same cast of characters. Kilimnik, Derkash, the various smears of people close to Trump. I mean, they don't actually name Giuliani by name, but it's clearly that they refer to Giuliani, Steve Bannon, and it's like we paid 50 billion for this. I mean, I can get a $10 a month subscription to the New York Times, and I'll get exactly the same stuff.
Yeah, and it's written by a certain group of people to be read by a certain group of people. It is people that need to have their thought system reinforced. Okay, it's a good grift. I mean, if you could get on that grift, okay, you don't have to have. So first of all, they don't present any evidence because I would assume there is no evidence. Okay, so that's why they invented highly probable. Okay,
high confidence. There's a high confidence. Yes, it sounds good. High confidence means nothing. I mean,
if we go back to the intelligence assessment in January 2017. That was done on the fly. Right. And it was because you can't have, if you look at the history of the intelligence assessments, they don't happen in a few weeks. No. They don't. Sorry. And sometimes they take years.
No, there's no question. That was by Brennan, and Brennan openly admitted that he basically put together a group of people who would write what he wanted them to write. And that was it. That was the ICA. And of course, that they also made use of the Steele dossier in preparing that the 2017 ICA document. They used the Steele dossier, even though they lied about it, but they used the Steele dossier, which is rubbish.
It was 25 pages long. There were 3 blank pages, and 7 pages of it was devoted to RT, which had information that was 4 or 5 years old.
It was about the RT circa 2012. It was a report that they published about RT in 2012.
Yeah, it was written by some intern, okay, with open sources, okay? Why? That's what we spend billions and billions of dollars on?
Yeah. That's right. But what you're saying about Christopher Steele is, of course, a very interesting one, because here was a case when we have direct evidence of a foreign power interfering in a US election. Christopher Steele is a former MI6 man. There is no such thing as a former MI6 man. Everybody knows this. I mean, it's like the oldest cliche that you never really retire from the intelligence service. So that document that he prepared for the Clinton campaign obviously was authorized by senior levels of the UK government. And we know the UK government did not want Trump. They never wanted Trump there. And so they were very happy with laundering this garbage into the US political system. Now, that's interference. It never gets mentioned, when they write these intelligence reports, always about Russia. And then there's never any evidence. I mean, they're just, Russians comment on American affairs. They're entitled to do it. You can't stop Russians talking about elections.
I mean, we can look at RT. I mean, RT if you like it or not. It is a platform where people can say things where they're not allowed to say on American cable. John Mearsheimer, I mean, one of the most important thinkers of international relations of all time. He dissented against the Iraq War. Boom! You never saw him again. You never saw him again. I had the great privilege of having John Mearsheimer and Stephen Cohen on the same program, okay? And Mearsheimer told me this before we started our recording. He said, I haven't been on television since the Iraq War. I mean, he is a great, phenomenal thinker.
Right.
But, you know, he's one of the first cases where they just airbrushed him out. He doesn't exist.
Right. That's what people deliberately refuse to understand, which is that the reason why people appear on RT is not because they like Russia or they don't like Russia.
They may not know anything about Russia.
The platform. They don't get on TV. They don't get on CNN. They don't get on ABC. Russia, the RT provides them with a platform.
Let me give you an example. Yesterday, I did a recording, my first recording back in the studio after a year. We had Ray McGovern, William Beanie,
right.
Now the godfather of the NSA. Right. And then you have Ray McGovern. Everyone, do you know what Ray McGovern did at one time? For George H.W. Bush, he went to the White House every morning. Ray McGovern went to the Oval Office every morning and reviewed the daily intelligence report for the President of the United States. So he, with his pedigree, and his knowledge and experience, he tells us how American foreign policy actually works. I think he's a pretty authoritative character. When's the last time you saw him on MSNBC, George?
Oh, that's right. That's exactly right. Whereas Brennan, and you know, what is really disgusting about these people, such as Brennan, is that they go around throwing out these terms like traitor, treason, Trump is a tool of the Kremlin, and they never suffer any repercussions. I have to say, 20, 30, 40 years ago, you would suffer repercussions. You couldn't just get away with calling somebody a traitor. I mean, at the very least, you might get a mouthful of teeth. I mean, it's an incendiary charge, and yet, it's apparently you could just get away with this kind of nonsense. I mean, Nancy Pelosi says, "Oh, with Trump, all roads lead to Putin. What's Putin got on him?" If I were Trump, I would say, "Look, it's disgusts me to have this woman in my office. I'm not going to have her in the Oval Office anymore because I just find it so repulsive that such a loathsome creature should be around me." Now, Trump never did that. I mean, he's much too polite. But that's what you should say. I mean, if somebody accuses you of being a traitor, you should say, I don't want to have anything to do with this person.
I don't think that's ever been said. Trump was too polite. I don't think that's ever been said. But it's true.
I know, but he is too polite. I mean, if somebody calls you a traitor and you just sort of, okay, shrug your shoulders, I mean, I think that's very polite.
But George, I mean, you and I know very well. In our long time in looking at being interested in looking at politics, throwing out the T word,
right.
That's when that's like closing the door. I mean, you can't have a conversation. And now it is done all of the time. And that's how poisoned our discourse is. Because if you call someone a traitor, how can you interact with them? You can't. You've closed the door. You can't unring that bell.
No, exactly.
And that's why you shouldn't do that.
Right. Or and if you have that, and if you're going to call somebody a traitor, bloody well provide the evidence. What's your evidence of saying that? Just simply saying, well, I don't like what he says about Russia. Sorry, that's not evidence that he's working for the Kremlin. But that seems to be fine for Brennan, fine for Pelosi, and then fine for much of the media, which are happily, clapping their hands with glee when they say it.
Because you've already said it. There is absolutely no downside of being wrong. Look at Jake Sullivan, one of the shakers and movers of American foreign policy as we speak. He was a notorious Russiagator.
Absolutely. Yeah. He was one of the key figures who created the Russiagate. No repercussions whatsoever. On the contrary, big promotion. So is the case with this guy, Ned Price, who is now at the I think he's the spokesman of the State Department. Again, big promotion. Also went around accusing Trump of treason. I mean, it's an amazing that you can just do this now. And that, again, is a consequence of the intelligence people just inserting themselves into domestic politics and nobody resisting it. Whereas before, people would resist it.
Actually, not resisting, embracing it.
Right, exactly. I mean, remember back in the 1970s when we first learned about the CIA's interference in domestic affairs. That had repercussions.
Okay, I think we're freezing up a little bit.
We are a bit. Okay, all right, Peter. We will take our cue.
Ran out of gas.
Exactly, running out of gas. Exactly. All right. Remember, we are now on Rumble. Please look us up on Rumble. And remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.